Hey everybody, I'm Jack Reeder with Future Pastimes, and I'm a designer on expansions for the classic Dune board game, the 2019 Gale Force 9 edition. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favorite Dune factions to play now that we have the third expansion out for Dune. So 12 factions total in the game. Which are the ones that I like to play the most? And I'm going to address this just in terms of the factions alone. I think if I were including something like the home worlds, which do add some new things that each faction can do, the answers would be a little bit different, and I may touch on that a little bit more. But let's dive in. We're going to start with number 5 on the list, and that is Rich S. Now, Rich S is a tough faction to play, and I think that for me is the big appeal, is just the challenge. They're not an easy faction to win with because they start off in a fairly weak and poor position, and they are a slow burn faction. But the reason that I like Rich S so much is that I enjoy trying to manipulate things and waiting for an opening to strike and make my move. And so it's not an early game faction by any means. And I think that I like to sneak around with the no-field tokens, keeping the number of my forces secret. That appeals to me. I especially love to try to harass players with the 0 no-field token. And then the other part of it, the other main part of the faction, of course, are the treachery cards that they are selling. So I really enjoy trying to read the table and figure out what is the optimal sell on each turn. And part of it is how much spice I think I can get by selling the card. Part of it is when do I think I can be the one who's going to get the card because I'm selling last. Players are full, especially the rich factions. I can tell who's on Chome Charity or who's already bid up a lot of their spice, so then I can get a good card for less for myself. And then the other part of it is getting the cards into my allies' hands, so either by helping them to win it or using the Rich S Alliance ability to win the card and then just give it to the ally when they need it. So I like that subterfuge, especially if Rich S has managed to get more than one of their own cards. So by winning a couple of auctions or maybe even using their special once per game Karama to secretly buy one of them so that nobody knows which one that you have. And since the Rich S are selling a Karama card at some point, that's what I really like to do, is get to the point where I'm pretty sure I can win the auction, buy the Karama card, and then I've got it, and I can use it to buy one of my own other cards like the Null Entropy Box or Stone Burner or something else at a time when nobody knows that I have it. So that's really what appeals to me about Rich S. Being able to win as Rich S in the 9-player game at Gen Con was a real treat, especially winning with Chome. Those are the 2 factions that are in the second expansion together. So it's very gratifying. A win with Rich S is a well-earned win. And so, yeah, it's very satisfying, but also not very common. So I think that is what adds to that as well. So right on the heels of that, number 4 for me is Chome. I actually really like to play Chome for a lot of reasons. One, I do like that regular income, and it is pretty consistent throughout the game. There's definitely going to be times where 1 or 2 factions are collecting charity, but not always 2. Sometimes you're just getting the 1 spice. So that will eat into it a lot, but you're getting that regular influx of the spice income. So I like that. I like that they've got the 5-card hand, and that worthless cards are actually a nice surprise for them. Even if they're not going to use them for the special effect, which I absolutely go out of my way to try to do. I'm looking to use the Balisette and the Jubba Cloak, and not just the Trip to Gamant, although that is a favorite move of mine. But you can sell them. So even if you're like, all right, I spent some money, I got that worthless card. Well, if I need the spice, I can just sell it. So I enjoy that. I like that in Advanced you have the Auditor as a leader that you can keep reviving if they get killed, but you're getting card information by putting that Auditor out there to find out who has what. So I like to send a small force in with the Auditor, fight it out, get some information. I'm going to see cards that they use in the battle. And of course, everyone will see that, but then I'll get a little bit more information. This is especially effective against the Harkonnen, and to some degree, like the Emperor, who almost always has 4 cards. So you're going to see 2 of those maybe in a battle, but I like to know what they're keeping back. So I know if they've got the Poison Tooth or the Poison Blade and they just haven't used it yet, the Lays Gun, Hajar, it's good to know all these things so that you can plan. So I think, again, this is another faction that doesn't typically go for an early win. And that's kind of my style. I don't like to necessarily go for it very early. There's just too many unknowns. I like to gather some information. And it's surprising that that neither of the information factions is going to be on this list. I have my reasons for it. So I enjoy the gameplay with CHOAM. And I especially like all the special effects that they can do with the worthless cards. And that was Peter Alaka. I thought it was a great idea as soon as he suggested it. So it was fun coming up with all of the effects for them. La 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 is a funeral chant, so it made sense that it had something to do with revivals. So yeah, I enjoyed that aspect designing it, and so it's very gratifying for me to play it. All right, we're going into the top 3 now. So the number 3 for me is Harkonnen. I love playing the Harkonnen. When it was just the base game 6 factions, Harkonnen is my go-to. I like that they're getting free treachery cards every time they buy them, so I don't feel bad about spending 5 or even 6 spice on a card, knowing that I'm getting 2. They start with an extra one. They get the extra traders, which I like, and my favorite thing is in Advance, of course, and that is capturing leaders. I love to capture leaders. So I go into a battle. I'm happy to sacrifice everyone there to make sure that I win that battle so that I can capture a leader. And if I've killed a leader in the battle, all the better, especially if I'm getting the spice for it, because Harkonnen don't have an income. So I do want to get the spice, but I also want to get the leaders. And I almost always keep the leaders because I like taking them out of circulation. And if I need to get into a battle with somebody that I think is unlikely to have that leader as a traitor, especially if I'm attacking somebody with one of their own leaders, then I like to use that. So Harkonnen for me, I lean into the treachery. I've always enjoyed that. And I think overall, when you look at this list, you'll see that it's very on brand for what I like thematically while playing Dune. So yeah, the only real economic faction on this list is CHOAM. I always consider Rich S a pseudo-economic. They're getting some income, but it's very sporadic, and you never really know how well you're going to do. It might just be 3 spice, even 2 spice, just depending on things you're going. Sometimes you can get someone to spend way too much on a card, especially using those once-around auctions, or even like, the blind auction, or rather the silent auction, is sometimes somebody overestimates what everyone else is willing to spend. So that's a fun part of it, which I didn't mention before. But Harkonnen, yeah, they're fun to play. I love the just the sinister nature of their advantages. Suits me pretty well. So sort of in the same ballpark with my number 2 pick is Mortani, the faction that resorts to terrorism. So not that I'm sympathetic or enjoy terrorism, but I do love to play Mortani. And the main part of their faction, of course, are the terror tokens. So I love the effect that has on the game, where you're playing them face down, and the other players are very nervous about what those tokens might do. They are not anxious to have one of their leaders killed or have their spice taken from them or to blow up a huge number of forces. So they just don't want to risk it. And so it's fun trying to figure out which token to place when and where to put it. Do you put it in a stronghold where Mortani has forces as a deterrent to keep people out? And if so, which token do you put there? people aren't expecting you to put the atomics token in a stronghold where you have a lot of your forces. Maybe you put the sneak attack there so that you can bolster your forces there if somebody is coming for you. Or maybe it's just extortion so that you're getting some spice, and maybe you're going to get that token back because nobody wants to pay you to remove it from the game after it's been triggered. So I enjoy that. I think the other fun part, of course, is assassinating leaders. So this is similar to what the Harkonnen do, but they're revealing their traitor card in order to assassinate that leader when they fight that faction, and that particular leader wasn't there. But the great part is then they get to draw a new treachery card, or new traitor card rather, and so they could potentially do this a number of times. Now, they can only assassinate one leader per faction. So if I assassinated a Bene Gesserit leader, and then I drew another Bene Gesserit, I can't assassinate. And in fact, I pretty much have lost the assassinate advantage. I do have a traitor now, which I can reveal normally. And I could have revealed that traitor if I faced that leader. But again, once you reveal the traitor, then the assassinate leader's advantage goes away. So the best case scenario is that each time you draw, you're getting somebody from a new faction. You're not drawing one of your own leaders, although once you do that, you know you have a safe leader, which is important, especially in a game with the Harkonnen and a Tleilaxu. But it's more fun to be able to just keep popping off leaders from other factions and keeping them nervous. They just don't know. And then, of course, the final and possibly most powerful advantage they have is enemy of my enemy, which lets them get into an alliance during the shipping and movement phase. If somebody moves into a stronghold that has a terror token, instead of triggering that token, Moritani can offer an alliance with that player. And depending on the turn order and the state of the board, they can swoop in and win the game. And so that is, I think, a very exciting element. It doesn't hurt that they can also steal Duke Vidal right out from the clutches of the ECAS if they're in the game. So having that 6 strength leader with no traitor card is also a bonus, but they do have to get into some battles in strongholds in order to get him. So that's not always easy to do, but it's a fun little thing, especially when you're going for the win, to know, all right, well, I'm going to be able to use Duke Vidal in one of these battles. So that's why I enjoy playing Moritani. It's very easy to understand, although there's a lot of nuance in how to really leverage them. And I look forward to hearing how other players have successfully managed their terror tokens, as well as the enemy of my enemy advantage. And that brings us to my number one faction, and that is the Tleilaxu. I love the Tleilaxu, and it's not just because they're purple and I like to play purple, although, if I'm being honest, that is a major part of it, but I just really enjoy the Tleilaxu. Again, it's another late game faction. They start off very weak, not very much spice, not very much income in the first few turns of the game, typically. But as the game goes on, especially the longer the game goes on, the Tleilaxu get richer and richer. And then, of course, the face dancers, which is my favorite mechanism in the game. I know that it's controversial for some, but I think, and I'm tooting my own horn here for sure, I think it's really good game design. It didn't really involve any new components, because when we first started tackling the Tleilaxu, we had a whole separate deck of face dancers, and I was just like, this seems kind of silly. We have a deck of all of the leaders already. Let's just use that instead. So I love the idea that they've got those 3 traitor cards, that they are waiting for those leaders to win a battle. And the Tleilaxu don't even have to be in that battle, although it turned out they were in that battle that whole time, and on the winning side. So I love the fact, and again, it's similar to the Moritani in that it adds a lot of really juicy tension to the game. People are nervous about the Tleilaxu being in a couple of strongholds, and then there being a lot of battles in that same turn where they might be inadvertently giving the win to the Tleilaxu, which I wholeheartedly endorse. Please do give the win to the Tleilaxu. They're working hard, reviving bodies. It's dirty work, and they deserve to rule Arrakis as their reward. Not really, but it is fun. It's not really that often that the Tleilaxu just win the game because of a face dancer when they themselves were in no battles. I know that hypothetically it is absolutely true. They could win on turn 1, having shipped nobody down to the planet. But it's just the fear of that is what I think is delicious about the Tleilaxu. It doesn't happen often. In fact, in most games, they don't even reveal one or even two face dancers in a lot of games that I'm playing. So, because a lot of times what happens is nobody has chosen the Tleilaxu leaders as their traders. So there's 5 of them still on the trader deck. So they're drawing them. And a lot of people aren't drawing the low level leaders like, Dr. Yui and, Uman Kadu and Vando Terboli. And those guys aren't typically going to win a battle. And that's the thing, is that the leader has to win the battle. So people with the Tleilaxu in the game, they tend to choose the high-strength leaders just so that they know where they are. And, of course, what happens is that the other players are worried about their high-strength leaders, so they start playing the mid-level ones. And that's where the Tleilaxu can shine, because if there's some mid-level leaders that haven't been chosen and they're still in the trader deck, that's what the Tleilaxu is hoping to draw. So they're fun for me to play. I like having them in the game even if I'm not playing them, because I like the fact that you can get leaders out sooner rather than later. You're like, oh, Chani died. She's one of my best leaders. I've got some spice, so I can convince the Tleilaxu to let me revive her. And they can up the revival limit of forces to 5, which sometimes is a necessary evil. You've taken a beating, you went for it and didn't win, but you've still got some spice, so you want to be able to get your forces out faster than you would normally. Sometimes, especially somebody like the Emperor, they're getting 1 free revival. They maybe don't want to spend 4 spice on revivals, but sometimes if they really have taken a beating, they're like, yeah, I'm fine with spending that, and I can spend even more on my ally. So I like having them in the game even if I'm not playing them, but I prefer to be the one playing them. I like to be purple. When I see all those purple forces on the board, I just assume that they're mine, and I start making bad decisions because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not in Carthage. What am I doing? So it's just better if you just let me be the Tleilaxu and we call it a day. So those are my top 5. I'm certainly interested in hearing what are your favorite factions. What do you think of these? Were some of them a surprise? You were surprised to see some of them there? The great thing about it is that it was not really an easy decision. I think the top 1 or 2, maybe even 3, 4 and 5 was a little bit more difficult. I almost put the Bene Gesserit on there. Of course, the voice is great. I love having 5 strength leaders. And if I'm using homeworlds, I love the Wallach 9 advantage of being able to send advisors in faster earlier, even if it means that once you get to low threshold, you don't get to send them anymore. But at that point, when I don't have the homeworld advantage, I'm too tempted to spread my forces out, which has never worked for me. So I think it's better for me to be able to concentrate them. I like having a big stack in the polar sink very early in the game, because then I can move into Carthage or Arakeen, and I've got those forces can make it to 4 strongholds with the Ornithopters. So it becomes a very impressive force that you are marshaling, and you got them on the planet for free. So I really like them. So with the homeworlds, that changes things up a little bit as well. I think with the Richess homeworld, Richess still stays on the list, because then they can ship forces along with the no field, which goes a little bit counter to how I typically like to play it. I like bringing in small numbers of forces and then putting them in the polar sink, for instance, or somewhere unobtrusive, going after spice maybe, but just marshaling my forces onto the board and stockpiling them to wait for the right turn to then move them in. Very similar to what I do with the Bene Gesserit using their homeworld as well. So homeworlds will definitely have an impact on which factions I choose. I'm much more likely to choose the Emperor if using homeworlds. They are actually very low on my list. I don't particularly enjoy choosing the Emperor. The income is great. In advance, sure, you got the Sardaukar, just as long as you stay away from the Fremen. But I like the sneakier stuff better. So that's just me. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.